A couple of weeks ago, the Line Opinion Panel asked whether or not New Mexico has too many public institutions of higher learning. But the problem may not be in the amount of schools, but in the way the system is managed. An article in the Albuquerque Journal this week reported that the New Mexico Higher Education Department is leading a study to look at the way the state is running its 31 public colleges and universities. And with me to discuss this topic and other news of the week certainly are Sophie Martin. She's an attorney and editor of DukeCityFix.com. Stephen Spitz is here. He's host of New Mexico People, Places, and Ideas on KUNM 89.9 FM on your dial. Daniel Foley, former House Minority Whip, is with us, and Dan Boyd. He's the Capitol Bureau Chief for the Albuquerque Journal. Thanks for joining me. Dan, starting with you. Secretary Dameron, in fact, wants to look at the 21 governing bodies and how they make these decisions that oversee the 31 colleges and universities that we have. I think this is an interesting angle she's taking because this is where the rubber meets the road, basically, and how these things happen. Give us a little background here. I mean, 21 different governing bodies seems quite unwieldy just on its face.
Yeah, I think, this comes after, obviously, at a point where the state has had a budget crunch for a few years, and the legislature actually passed a memorial this year, which requires this study. It doesn't actually compel any change in law, but to kind of look at this, I mean, you mentioned the 21 different kind of boards overseeing 31 different institutions. It seems, it's a very decentralized system and maybe not that efficient. The counter argument would be that New Mexico is a pretty rural state, and for a lot of folks, it's a long way to Albuquerque or a long way to Las Cruces. So I think it'll be interesting to see what comes of this, and then making some hard political decisions to take some action.
That's right. Steve, the Secretary promises a report by the end of the year for legislators to mull over in the next session. But when you really think about how this works, we've got governing boards that ostensibly are local people who know best what's going on. They understand the community, they understand the college and its value to the community. Is it really viable that you could have one central board, so to speak, overseeing all 31 of these institutions and be fair to everybody? Or in fact, is this the better way to go in your view?
You're definitely going to need local input in order to make any intelligent decision. But it seems to me that, and I guess I respectfully disagree with your opening, which is that I don't think this is the right way to approach the problem. The question is, there's like 31 universities and I think 36 other satellites. So the question really is, do we have an efficient, effective higher education system? I don't think, personally, I'm not surprised that there are 21 boards for 31 institutions.
No.
I mean, at least there aren't 31 boards.
That's a good point.
So it seems to me that if you're going to do something about our system, the dispersal of higher education all over the state, you're going to end up having to convince the legislature to do something about it. And to do that, I think you're going to have to convince legislators that a particular college or university or satellite needs to be consolidated with something else, needs to be grouped with something else, and that would save money. And it seems to me if you're not focusing on the fundamental issue, this isn't going to get anywhere, particularly since there's only one legislative session left for this administration. So if you're going to lay the groundwork to actually accomplish something, I think you need to do it directly and say, okay, what's wrong with the system? How can we make it more efficient and effective? I don't think governing is the problem. There's actually no detail to what she says about why governing is the problem. The problem is, arguably, and this is what some people say, there's just too many access points. So we don't need all these access points.
70 plus.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a scary number right there.
Right.
Sophie, there's an overall goal that the Secretary is trying to get here, and that is an aggressive goal to have 60% plus folks by 2030 having at least an associate's or better here. Pretty aggressive number when you're talking about the national number, somewhere around 40%. Not a bad idea. If we're going to play catch up, you want an aggressive number out there. Does this make sense as part of that process to getting that done?
I think it's a good question. There maybe is a sort of a stepping back that needs to happen. Just at this point, with our unemployment rate where it is, I think part of what we need to be looking at is, are we educating people for the jobs that we actually think will be available to them here in New Mexico, certainly within a reasonably short period of time. One of the real challenges I think that we're going to see in this study, and it's a challenge that would be there at any time, is that with this administration in in control of the executive, you've got a whole group of people who are saying, yeah, you're talking best practices, yeah, you're talking about doing this study, but we don't believe that you're going to do it from the right perspective. We think your goal here is to cut as opposed to improve. I mean, to Steve's point before, and once we have a Democratic governor once again in office, eventually we will. There will be a whole other group that says, we don't know that we like the way that study's going to go. I mean, we have some tremendous gridlock in particular around educational issues right now. And I'm not saying that one has to come before the other, but I think the expectation from the PED is that this is going to be rough.
Is she protecting herself a little bit by having such a big group? There's about 100 people involved.
Well,
academics
I will say good luck making decisions with a group of 100, but it does seem like that's what she's trying to do, is to get a large number of voices in there. Ultimately, are all 100 going to have the ability to make a meaningful difference in terms of their input? Probably not. And the concern, I think, amongst some individuals or some groups as well, is that the conclusion is preordained. And this is just window dressing to kind of get us to that.
What would be that conclusion? That the schools aren't going to in fact be closed?
My sense is that the concern is that there will be cutting, there will be loss of local control, loss not just of local control, but also of local access.
Gotcha. Dan, one of the complaints, as we read it from the article, is that the governor, whoever the governor might be next, or this current especially, is not getting good information with this amount of governing boards. Do you know what I mean? There's not a way to flow up, so to speak, when you got 21 different boards. So I ask again, is a centralized board the better answer here? And is there a fairness issue if that happens? Like, who makes up this board? Who do they represent? Is it a geographical representation? Is it just, our upper tier of school? You see what I mean? It gets problematic trying to decide who would be on this.
So I don't disagree with that. I completely disagree with what he said about that we should go looking to the legislature, because the legislature, I can tell you right now, if you try to cut E&MU Roswell, and I represent Roswell, you ain't cutting it.
No, they're going to lose their minds. I agree.
So what needs to happen is we got to pick a group that can look at this in and of itself and say, we got to make the right decisions. I think an even bigger decision than, are we spending too much on the schools? I've railed about this. We've talked about this here before. I got a son that left the University of New Mexico, went to Eastern New Mexico, and he lost almost a year worth of credits. Wow. And the credits he lost were beginning level classes. You're telling me freshman English at UNM is taught different than freshman English at Eastern? I mean, I get it if he was majoring in pre-med biology. I get if it's an upper level class, if you're a research institution. I get all of that. We've got a turf war in this state that is costing this state unbelievable amounts of money. So in California, you've got specific boards of regents that oversee all of those schools, right? You got the UC board, you've got those types of institutions. We're a small enough state that I think you could have the avenues of flow through where if we had one board, it, obviously it couldn't be 100 people, but it would have to be a fairly accurate representation that this board was the clearinghouse for what was happening. Right now, we've got every college, every university, every community college, every vocational school has a lobbyist. They're up there pushing their agenda. They're trying to get their things done. They're getting things done through capital outlay in the past where, well, the program has started because we built the buildings and we bought the equipment. Now, if you don't fund us, Department of Higher Ed, we've wasted all this money. There's no greater scenario in New Mexico of the tail wagging the dog than higher education. And I think Dr. Dameron is doing the right thing. She's doing the tough thing, which is saying, we've got to figure this out. I think she's the kind of person who can, by the way, I've known her for quite a few years. I know both her and JR, Doctor and Doctor, for a very long time. I think if there's anybody who can take that input from people and then parse it into meaningful decision-making process, I think Barbara Dameron is the right person. And I think the governor's on board for doing this. The question is going to be, to his point, is once this comes out, is the legislature going to say, are the people that represent Roswell,
right? You can't
now, but what you could do is you could, without legislative buy-in, if you've got this single board, right, you could kind of bypass legislative buy-in by saying, look, we as the Board of Regents for the state of New Mexico don't think that you should have New Mexico Highlands University across the street from UNM on Central. Right. Got to be a problem with that.
Yeah, there you go. A couple of minutes left, Dan. We can't talk about this without talking about money, where it comes from, and all this. Some reporting late last year by one of your colleagues in Las Cruces made a very interesting point that between 20 and 60% of our schools, our higher education places, the money comes from our bucket of money designated for, and that's just too high. But you get like 40, 50, 60%. It's not tuition at that point. So Secretary Dameron's making a case that, look, something's got to give here. Either tuition's going to have to go up, or we're going to have to kick in even more money out of our education bucket to make this work. That's going to be a tough sell, to Stephen's point, in the legislature as well. You see what I mean? It's a difficulty.
Yeah, and already we've seen higher ed funding, I think, cut by 8% over the last 2 years. I mean, they've been kind of an easy target, and tuition already has increased. I think some of the underlying issues here is the state population, has been pretty stagnant. You're not having as many kids coming out. And then also, a lot of the younger folks are leaving, so your higher ed's in this point where they're losing funding from the state and having to raise up tuition, and it's kind of becoming a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. So I think some of these schools are, it seems like New Mexico State, trying to get creative and be proactive, making some changes before waiting for the the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. Steve, finish up here with us on this. We've got about just 30 seconds here. This idea of these kind of percentages, and they can't hold, certainly. So what's the state to do if student enrollment's dropping? Can you arguably raise tuition on the kids that are going to go to school here?
You're between a rock and a hard place. Right. I mean, first of all, it seems like revenue's going up, so there may actually be more money next year. But if there isn't more money, then I think, to me, our state suffers from scarcity all through the public sector. We need additional tax revenues, not just in higher education, but throughout the state. And so I think that's going to be the grounds upon which the next gubernatorial race is fought, and the Democrats are going to make that an issue. And I would guess that something's going to give on that.
That's right. Well, John Arthur Smith says we're spread too thin, and that could be a difficulty next session for sure. When we come back to the line, we'll talk about Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke's visit to New Mexico.